Washington State's a little bit behind us in terms of just the season of opening that is almost upon the entire nation. We'll pray that those get removed as soon as divinely possible, and that may the Lord give all of our leadership, especially in states like Washington and so forth, wisdom to make good decisions. Well, Memorial Day is again upon us, and it should be noted that Memorial Day is more than an opportunity for a 3-day weekend. I'm going to repeat that because I want everybody to catch that. Memorial Day is more than an opportunity to enjoy a 3-day weekend. Rather, it affords us the opportunity to consider and to commemorate the sacrifice of more than 1.3 million men and women who gave their lives in service to this nation. That being said, I hope you'll participate in tomorrow's town proceedings, or whatever town you may live in, should they be having some local proceedings. At the conclusion of this message, I'm going to invite our own Ron Phelps to come and share, and I'm sure he'll touch upon this theme and beyond. But I want to just kind of operate from the principle this morning that Memorial Day should matter to us as Americans. And I'm going to even go a step further, that perhaps it should matter more, even more so as Christians. Why? Because the themes of selflessness and sacrifice, they're at the heart of our faith and at the heart of our practice. And being addressed by virtually every book of the Bible, these are themes that we, in a sense, can't get enough of. So Memorial Day and the themes that it touches upon should matter greatly to us. Now, that being said, perhaps no book of the Bible touches upon the themes of selflessness and sacrifice as powerfully as the book of Philippians. So turn to that New Testament work, page 875 in your Bible. Now, I have no idea. If you're scrolling, just scroll until you see Philippians. I've chosen to explore this letter of the Apostle Paul to the ancient church at Philippi. We're going to begin in chapter 2, but we're going to go through a lot of Bible today. For that, I make precisely zero apology. Because as I tend to say, you folks ultimately didn't come to hear me and my word. You came here to hear the Lord and his word. Now, as we turn to Philippians 2, let me just set the table a little bit, that I would say that the center of gravity for this entire inspired work is found in its second chapter, and in Philippians chapter 2, starting at verse 5. We're going to see the Apostle Paul detail the story of Jesus' coming, his life, his ministry, his death, his resurrection, and finally his exaltation in a highly poetic manner. If you're looking for a very short, simple, condensed statement of what we believe as Christians regarding Christ and what he did, this is perhaps one of the greatest selections in the entire Bible. And though we've touched upon it many times from this pulpit, we're going to use it as our foundation today. Philippians chapter 2, starting at verse 5, the Apostle Paul says, "In your relationships with one another, have the same mindset as Christ Jesus." Verse 6, "who being in very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage." Older translations might say something to be grasped, held on to, maintained, and so forth. Verse 7, "rather he made himself nothing." Quite literally, he emptied himself by taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness, and being found, verse 8, in appearance as a man, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to death, even death on a cross. "Therefore, because of this, God exalted him to the highest place and gave him the name that is above every name, that at the name of Jesus every knee should bow, in heaven and on earth and under the earth, and every tongue confess or acknowledge that Jesus Christ is Lord, ultimately to the glory of God the Father." I want to read this quotation. It's a little bit long, but I'll do my best to take it slow enough. It's by a theologian and scholar named Tim Mackie, and he says the following, and I think it's worth sharing despite its length. "This passage is rich with echoes of Old Testament texts, specifically the story of Adam's rebellion in the garden, in the poems of the suffering servant in the book of Isaiah." This author says that this poem is worth committing to memory, and I would agree with that, as it is a beautifully condensed version of the gospel story. Before becoming human, the Messiah, the Christ, pre-existed in a state of glory and equality with God. Yet unlike Adam, who tried to seize equality with God, the Messiah, or the Christ, chose not to exploit his status for his own self-advantage. Rather, he emptied himself of status. He became human. He became a servant to all, and even more than that, the author says, he allowed himself to be humiliated publicly. He was obedient to the Father by going to his death on a Roman execution rack. But through God's power and grace, his shameful death was reversed through the resurrection, and now God has highly exalted Jesus as the King of all, bestowing on him or upon him the name that is above all names, so that all creation, that includes us, by the way, should recognize that Jesus is Lord to the glory of God the Father. That's a beautiful summation of what we just read. Now, I want to emphasize this. The whole sermon hinges upon this. The Apostle Paul is not sharing the story of Jesus' humility and sacrifice and ultimate victory just for the purpose of retelling it, though that would not be time wasted. Instead, he's putting forth the pattern of Jesus' life as an example and as a model that we are to mimic and aspire to and follow. Look at verse 5. Look at what he says. In your relationships with one another, you have the same mindset of Jesus Christ. You embrace the same attitude, the same sensibility regarding things like selflessness and sacrifice. Herein, the Apostle Paul is calling us by the Spirit to participate in the story of Jesus' life as we are called to share in his humility and selflessness and sacrifice, trusting that the day will come in God's good timing and for his glory that he will bring the corresponding elevation. And much of the rest of the book of Philippians really addresses these themes from varied angles, and they're worth looking at. And I'll put forth all eyes this way. In a generation that is characterized by prideful selfishness and self-absorption, we can't hear too much on the themes of humility and selflessness and self-sacrifice. If you don't believe that it's a narcissistic, prideful age, just check your Twitter or your Facebook or social media feeds. Now, I want to put forth to begin, and this is the longest of several points, and I'll move quickly. This was the type of life that Paul sought to live himself. I would say, as a good preacher and apostle and pastor, the Apostle Paul didn't just tell people to do things with no corresponding personal commitment to do it himself. And I would say that the Apostle Paul didn't practice what he preached. He preached what he practiced. He tried to live this kind of life and set an example himself, and that is worth noting. And I want to go to chapter 1, because I want you to see some things in the life of the Apostle Paul that are reflective of humility and selflessness and sacrifice. Those are the three key themes this morning. And we're going to see them in the life of Paul, and then we'll continue on. So as we turn to chapter 1, let me just set the table a little bit regarding the context of this letter. I'm going to put on my teacher hat for a second. The nerd in me likes this kind of information. Generally speaking, the Apostle Paul wrote this letter, what we call the book of Philippians, to address the concerns at the church of Philippi that they had for him. Now keep in mind that at the time of this writing, the Apostle Paul was in Roman imprisonment, which, last I checked, being in prison is by no means the easiest of circumstances to navigate. In the Philippian people, these people who knew and loved the Apostle Paul and saw him as a friend, as a peer, and as a spiritual mentor and father, they had every right, every earthly right at least, to be worried about their friend. If one of you is imprisoned for your faith, hear the next phrase carefully, that day may well come. Lord forbid. But should that day come, that one of our members is arrested for their faith and for the proclamation of the gospel, I would say it would be natural for us to be concerned about them, to wonder how they're doing. Are their needs being tended to in prison and beyond? Now, what's interesting is that the Apostle Paul comments that this season of difficulty and challenge had actually turned out for the good. And I want to look a little bit at Philippians chapter 1, verses 12 through 14. I want you to know, brothers and sisters, that what has happened to me, speaking of his imprisonment, has actually served to advance the gospel. Now, if I'm imprisoned for my faith, I'm likely going to complain a little bit. Carnal James, selfish James, self-centered James is probably going to say, Lord, why me? And wring my fist to the heavens. But Paul doesn't see it that way. He sees something quite different, that this moment of difficulty has actually served to advance the gospel. As a result, verse 13, it has become clear that throughout the entire palace guard and to everyone else that I am in chains for Christ. And because of my chains, most of the brothers and the sisters have become confident in the Lord and dare all the more to proclaim the gospel without fear. What the Apostle Paul is saying is that me being imprisoned, though it's rough, it's not the worst thing, because I've had opportunity to share the gospel with people that I may never have had a chance to connect with beforehand. What do you think is going to happen if you chain the Apostle Paul to a soldier who's there to guard him? Do you think that soldier's going to hear a little bit about Jesus? I wonder how many of these soldiers in prison administrators and beyond came to the knowledge of Jesus Christ because Paul was there to share the story strategically. And rather than complain and whine and make it all about him, he made it all about Jesus and about the needs of others. What do we see? We see humility, we see selflessness, and we see sacrifice. And moreover, this period has been beneficial because the people have seen Paul's good attitude and Christ-like mindset, and it's encouraged them to preach the gospel, even if it means some short-term difficulty and suffering. See, this is a level of Christianity that, let's be honest, this isn't where most churches are operating from. But the Apostle Paul put forth the example of Jesus as something that we are to aspire to and mimic, and he went so far to try to live out that example himself in daily life and living, and even in the most extreme of situations. Now, I want to skip down to verse 19, because we're going to see something incredible in context. Now, I want to just set the table a little bit more. In this passage, we're going to see that Paul is optimistic that he will soon be released, though he does admit the possibility that he may well be executed for his faith. And interestingly, the Apostle Paul prefers death to ongoing service. And we're going to see that in just a moment. Verse 19, I know that your prayers and God's provision of the Spirit of Jesus Christ, or that through those things, what has happened to me will turn out for deliverance. I eagerly expect and I hope that I will in no way be ashamed, but will have sufficient courage, so that now as always Christ will be exalted in my body, whether by life or by death. Why? For me to live is Christ, and to die is gain. And then he begins to enter into an internal wrestling match. If I'm to go on living in the body, this will mean fruitful labor for me. For me. Yet what shall I choose? I don't know. I'm torn between two things. I desire to depart and be with Christ, which is far better, or which is better by far. But it's more necessary for you that I remain in the body. And then he concludes with this, convinced of this, I know that I will remain, and I will continue with all of you for your progress and joy in the faith. Before I move on, I want you to notice the mindset of Paul here. Hear this clearly. Dying for Jesus, in the mind of Paul, it's not a sacrifice. Rather, the sacrifice for Paul is staying alive, to continue serving others, to continue encouraging others, to continue to inspire others, to continue to give himself so that the Church of Jesus Christ, individually, locally, and globally, as it was a worldwide movement at that point, spreading through the known world, that work would go on. So for Paul, that was the sacrifice, to love and prefer others more than himself. These verses, these passages, this mindset drips the idea of humility and selflessness and sacrifice. And I'm putting it forth for you to consider that this is the mindset that we are to pursue as it's reflective of how Jesus lived his life. I want to move on to chapter 3. Please stay with me. Philippians chapter 3. Now we're going to read that the Apostle Paul addresses once again the danger of false teachers who sought to supplant the true gospel of salvation by grace through faith with a religion of works. Now that might not sound like a big deal, but how many of you want the Lord to deal with you on how well you can behave? What if God dealt with you based upon how well you could obey him? How many of us would do well over the long term with that kind of a setup? I would blow it by noontime. Probably by 11:30, I'd find a way to mess it up. No, the true gospel is rooted in grace through faith. So Paul is dealing with, again, these teachers who continue to follow him wherever he goes to stir up issues. Now, the Apostle Paul, as we're going to see, he sees something of himself in these figures in that at one point in his past, he was a fierce persecutor of the church, who personally believed that it was up to him and his own abilities and his own capacities and his own accolades, what he could achieve. Those were the things that merited this relationship with the Lord. But like Jesus, he eventually came to realize those things were actually impediments to be cast aside, to trust solely in Jesus. Again, what are we talking about? Humility, selflessness, and sacrifice. Look at verse 4 of chapter 3. If someone thinks they have reasons to put confidence in the flesh, in other words, if someone genuinely believes that they can save themselves, I have more confidence, he's saying. In other words, if that was the mentality, I have the best shot of anyone. Why? Because I was circumcised on the right day. I'm a member of the people of Israel, of the tribe of Benjamin. I'm a Hebrew of Hebrews. In regard to the law, trying to keep the law that Moses had set forth through the Lord, I am a Pharisee. No one was more dedicated than we were. How many in the sound of my voice have memorized the entire Old Testament? Can anyone tell me how many letter A's appear in the Old Testament? That's what he was like. Nobody could rival a Pharisee to those details or regarding those details. For zeal, I was a persecutor of the church. And as far as a righteousness based on the law, in other words, I could tick off all the right boxes, I was faultless. But look at what he says in verse 7. But whatever were gains to me, I now consider lost for the sake of Christ. In other words, he's found a path of humility that's far better. And what's more, I consider everything a loss because of the surpassing worth of knowing Christ Jesus my Lord, for whose sake I have lost everything. I consider them, what's the word he uses in your translation? Rubbish, garbage. One of the better literal words is dung, excrement. All of the things he once trusted in, they're ultimately garbage. All that matters is that I gain Christ. Verse 9, that I be found in him, not having a righteousness of my own that comes from the law or good behavior, but that which is through faith in Christ. The righteousness that comes from God on the basis of faith. I want to know Christ. Don't answer out loud, but what do you want in life? What's that thing that you are the most targeted on, that the best of your time, the best of your energy, the best of investment goes to that thing? If you were to ask the Apostle Paul, that's what it was. All I want is to know Jesus and to know the power of his resurrection and participation in his sufferings, becoming, even willing to become like him in death, so that I may attain resurrection from the dead in verse 11. For the Apostle Paul, life was not found in personal accolades, in the right pedigree, in the right titles, in all of these self-centered things that the world, and frankly many in the church, pursue. Life is found in participating in the story of Jesus' life, this path of humility and selflessness and self-sacrifice unto the Lord. Go to chapter 4. I'm taking my time this morning. I'm tired of being in a rush. If at any point you have to leave, feel free. But I would recommend, please don't. Give the Lord genuine ear this morning. And here's the trick. Actually calibrate your life to these principles. Because this is where life really is. In a generation of broken people, we don't need one more pill. We don't need one more shot. We don't need one more self-help book. We don't need one more inspiring conference. We need Jesus and biblical principles practically and diligently applied. If you want life and life to the full, try it for a while. Paul's dedication to participate in the example of Jesus Christ is finally evident in this final chapter of the work. In chapter 4, the Apostle Paul, in context, takes the time to thank the Philippians for a sacrificial gift that they had offered. Again, they were concerned about Paul. So they sent a servant from their church named Epaphroditus. Bring that name back, ladies, if you're going to have kids. Epaphroditus, it's a good name. They sent Epaphroditus off to the Apostle Paul, who was imprisoned. And he brought for the Apostle Paul a gift, just some things to meet some personal and practical needs. He was imprisoned. Maybe a little bit of money, some jackets or something, I don't know, but just something sacrificial that they had sent. Now the Apostle Paul does thank them. But the Apostle Paul also wanted the Philippian believers to know that his imprisonment and poverty, these weren't true hardships for him. They had actually become the greatest of his teachers, showing him that no matter what the circumstance, he had learned the secret to contentment. How many want the secret to contentment this morning? Well, this is it. Chapter 4, verse 10, we're going to see it in context. I rejoiced greatly in the Lord that at last you renewed your concern for me. Indeed, you were concerned, but you had no opportunity to show it. Now, I'm not saying this because I'm in need. For I have learned to be content whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in any and in every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. I can do all this or all things through Christ or through him who gives me strength. Now, we love that verse. It's a bumper sticker verse. If you look in the bowels of your drawers at home, you probably have a t-shirt that says, I can do all things through him who gives me strength. But for the Apostle Paul, it wasn't just a nice slogan. And it wasn't a bumper sticker. And he didn't even own a car for a keychain. It was a truth that he lived by. No matter the season, no matter the circumstance, he had found a sense of contentment and peace, an inner harmony that remained and abided despite the affliction that he faced. And Lord knows the man faced some. He found the secret in navigating those moments by staying close to Jesus and allowing his supernatural power to give him whatever strength he had lacked. And Paul even reached a point in his other letters where he talks about those are the moments that I glory in, because when I'm weak, I don't try to compensate for it and puff my chest out and say I can do all things in my strength. I actually glory in my weakness, because those are the moments that I see God at work within me to bring forth renewal and change and transformation. And he is the one who is very necessary and very good at what he does. So Christian, whatever the circumstance you find yourself in, whatever affliction you may face, whatever challenge might be in your life at this current point, I would point you to the one who is capable, and here's the trick, who's actually willing to give you strength. I want to close with this point. I have a few more. Download the notes if you would like to. The Apostle Paul didn't just challenge himself to live this way, he challenged the church in general to live this way. Again, to follow the pattern of Jesus' humility, selflessness, and sacrifice. You're already in chapter 4. Let's look at verses 1 through 3 as I prepare to close. And that is not a pastoral lie. I actually am bringing the ship in or the airplane in for a landing. In chapter 4, we see the Apostle Paul called the people at Philippi to live out the story of Jesus. Humility, sacrifice, selflessness, and beyond. And we see him address two women. Verse 1 of chapter 4, final verse of the day. Therefore, my brothers and sisters, you whom I long for, my joy and my crown, stand firm in the Lord. Stand firm in the Lord in this way, dear friends. Now, I love what he says next. I plead with Euodia and I plead with Syntyche, also great names for daughters should you have them, to be of the same mind in the Lord. And yes, and I ask you, my true companion, help these women, since they have contended at my side in the cause of the gospel, along with Clement. And again, he knew these people very well, and the rest of my co-workers whose names are in the book of life. So somehow at the church of Philippi, though it was a strong, loving church, there had apparently erupted a little bit of conflict. All eyes closed, every hand up. Who's ever experienced a little conflict in the church before? It happens. See how musical that was? It was beautiful. I need a two-part harmony for that. Euodia and Syntyche, they were not B-teamers or rookies. These are people. These are women who had served alongside of the apostle. I would posit that for the most part, generally speaking, these were mature women in the faith who had likely won people to the Lord and had been instrumental in the operation, in the health, in the vitality, in the function at the church of Philippi. But somehow along the way, they were at odds. Something came up. We don't know what. But it was enough that Paul, in prison, heard about it, likely through Epaphroditus. God bless that man. And he felt the need to write about it. And he's challenging them to deal with it. Can I give you some friendly advice? Deal with it. If there's conflict, deal with it. Don't let it fester, because once those roots go deep, oh, they're awfully hard to purge from the garden of your heart. That's true in marriage, it's true in friendship, it's true in churches, it's true in your workplace. Deal with it. He's telling these ladies, and he's calling the church to rally around them. Let's deal with this. Rediscover your unity. Now, how do we do that? Well, again, much of the stubbornness and the resentment that fuels endless conflict, it's rooted in pride. It's rooted in selfishness, and it's rooted in self-promotion. The only way forward in those moments is to mimic the example of Jesus, to practice some humility, in some selflessness, in self-sacrifice. That one nugget is enough to save a marriage that's flailing. It's enough to bring back any friendship. It's enough to bring back any church from the brink of a split or a closure and beyond. There's life in the example of Jesus Christ. There just is. And the more that we seek to sync up with that example, the healthier and the better we'll be. Is it easy? No. If you want an easy faith here and at home, I promise you, biblical Christianity is not it. Go find someone that will give you warm fuzzies on all the feels, that will tell you, you do you or you be you. And when the train wreck finally happens, get back to the Bible and do what it says. Or you can choose wisely. You can say, you know what, perhaps Father does know best. Perhaps the Lord actually has set forth the way to live, and his Son has modeled it perfectly for us to aspire to. And we can see it in figures like the Apostle Paul, and we can try to emulate what they've done. And we can also see how Paul sought to impact others in a positive sense, calling them to also follow Jesus as he sought to follow Jesus. Paul, as I close, saw something wonderful in the story of Jesus' life. He had given himself to the task of reenacting that story, and he had sought to inspire that act in others as well. In every nation and in every age, the Apostle Paul's command continues to ring forth. In your relationships with one another, have the same mindset as Christ Jesus, who being in very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage. Rather, he made himself nothing. By taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness, and being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to death, even death on a cross. So as we go forth in the moments ahead, do that, live that, and let's do it together. Father, we come before you on this morning recognizing desperately our need for you. We cannot seek to live this life on our own. We do not have the power. but you are sufficient and you are able and you are willing to bring forth the renewal and the transformation from the inside out, that we might become like Jesus in how we live and how we think and the values that we hold and the message that we proclaim and the things that we say yes and or no to. Glorify yourself in all things. And Lord, on this Memorial Day weekend, as we prepare to go our separate ways after Ron shares, help us again to be cognizant, not just of the sacrifice of Jesus, though that's always primary, but the over 1.3 million people just like us, boys and girls comparatively, God, who were willing to selflessly give themselves for a grateful nation. Thank you for this time. Add your favor and your blessing in Jesus' name. Everyone says amen. At this point, I'm going to call forth our own Ron, who's going to come to share. Please give him the best of your attention. The workers downstairs are aware we're going to go a little bit longer today. It's certainly worthy of our time. That's totally fine, yeah. So if someone can go let Tracy know. Oh, okay, perfect. So Ron's going to come. We're going to give the kids a second or two to come on up. But I'm going to just give you the mic, Ron. You can close out the service whenever you want. I mean it. If you see folks getting antsy, that's on you.
Hope y'all brought lunch.
Do use the mic so the folks at home can hear you.
Yep. Here, I use good old-fashioned paper. You can keep this thing. So, for those of you who don't know me, try to keep them thumps to a minimum. My name is Ron Phelps. For a little over 20 years, I've been working on airplanes at Westover, and for the last 9 or so years, the pastor has allowed me to come up here and share my thoughts on Memorial Day. And it's been a cool 9 years, because as I look through and research the stories that I've told, I've run across some really remarkable people, and and I've told you stories of boys that have jumped on grenades to save all of the people around them. I've told you stories of medics that, despite not having a weapon, ran into the battlefield being shot multiple times and dragging comrade after comrade back to safety and sacrificing their own life. And I've even told you of chaplains who, while their ship was sinking, passed their gloves and cold weather gear to the boys getting onto the lifeboats, and as the ship sunk, could be heard singing and praising God. And I've told you stories of a young captain who wrote a letter to his wife and said, "How do I do this? How do I lead these boys? How do I lead these men through these jungles when I don't know if I'm going to see them all tomorrow?" And who just happened to step on a landmine and was gone. We as Christians have a unique understanding of what it means to have someone die in your place. And so it should be easy for us to celebrate God today, and then tomorrow, we honor the men and women who died protecting us, protecting the freedoms and the ideals that make it possible for us to be here today. So, I brought something with me. I don't know how many of you have actually seen one of these flags, never mind know what it means. This is a service flag. And if you were somewhere in this town in the mid to late 40s, you would have seen many of these flags hanging in many doors and windows everywhere, in every part of town. This transcended class, this transcended race, this transcended any ethnicity. Everybody was part. How many of you know what this means? This means the star no longer shines in that house. This means that son, or now that daughter, is not coming home to their bed. And with the Korean and Vietnam conflicts following the World War II, there were enough veterans in this town to fill 2 American Legion posts. And with them, there were more grieving families. So I've tried to tailor my message more from the people that we honor on Memorial Day towards the people that we stand alongside on Memorial Day. And I brought a short video of what they call a Gold Star mother. And a Gold Star mother had this flag. AJ, if you please.
I'm an American Gold Star mother. I became so when I lost my youngest son, U.S. Army Ranger Corporal Ryan McGee, in his 4th tour of duty in Decret. The motivating factor for Ryan to join the Rangers was 9/11. That had a tremendous impact on that fateful day. He was very proud of the Ranger program. He was very, it is a band of brothers. He enjoyed life to the fullest. Before he became an Army Ranger and a football player, he was part of that Generation X program. He was a skateboarder and a snowboarder. So he always found a way to get what he wanted. He was very sports oriented always. In high school, he was voted most liked and most charismatic. And he loved me. He was very good to me. He achieved so much in such a little time. He always helped the underdog. Whenever he would see someone that was not being done right, he would always step in, even if he was the littler. He was always in there helping the underdog. He would give everything his best. And he always had a smile for everyone. He always found the good in everyone. Honestly, to be honest with you, I rarely ever heard him say anything negative about anyone. And that smile. I'm proud that he went after every goal he ever wanted and achieved it. He saved 2 people's lives. I'm proud of that. You couldn't ask for a better son. He's my hero.
I tried to find Ryan's Bronze Star citation, but like all government red tape and paperwork, it never catches up with the moment. And it's said that there's no sound more painful than the sound of a mother crying for a dead child. I've seen the same grief on a mother of 90 and a mother of 35. That's a Gold Star mother, crying for a son or daughter they'll never see again. Or a father, so proud of his son or his little girl in a uniform, seeing them lying in that uniform. A wife or husband, now alone, wondering how the plans they have made and the life they were about to live could be so quickly stolen away. Or a little boy or a little girl wondering why one of their parents isn't there. and wondering why the other is so sad. This is the last time I'll speak to you as a member of the armed services. I retired September 11th of this year, and I was an aircraft mechanic. I don't bear any scars of war. I bear only the oil and grease of a 30-year-old machine and the scars of the misuse of hand tools. I've never served in combat, and as a matter of fact, I've held a loaded weapon once in my career, and it was just guarding a gate well inside the base. I have no personal experience to qualify me to speak here today. And I began helping in the parades around town purely out of my own self-interest. There is no cooler feeling than carrying the American flag in the front of a parade. I did it for all the wrong reasons. But as Paul says in here, who cares why you did it? The point is you did it. You preached Christ, maybe for the wrong reasons, but you still preached Christ. And it wasn't, and like everything else that you do for the wrong reasons, as soon as a little adversity starts, you're like, what am I doing this for? And that was me standing in the sunshine in my nice dark blue suit, wondering, as the sun baked me out of the thing, my shoulder hurts, I'm starting to sweat. What am I doing? And I started questioning, is this even worth it? And then the post chaplain came up, as he always does. And this was a post chaplain that was on the USS Enterprise when it was hit by a kamikaze. It flew into the flight deck and it killed 14 of his shipmates and injured 85 of them. And I watched this man recount the story of smoking and joking with his friend the day before. And then the next day, he was dead. He was gone. His voice cracked. There were tears in his eyes. It was a heartbreaking loss that stung just as hard 60 years later as it did the day it happened. And then it was that moment I understood. Suddenly, who cares if I'm sweating? Suddenly, who cares if my shoulder feels like it's on fire and going to fall off? I don't care. I'm going to stand there. I'm going to stand there because these guys stood there. What would have happened in the Battle of the Bulge had the airborne that was outnumbered, outmatched, in their foxholes at minus 30 degrees said, oh, it's too cold, I'm going home. It's too cold, I'm not going out there to march today. We don't have Memorial Day to thank our veterans. We do that on our own time. Memorial Day is just that. It's a memorial to the men and women who will never watch their children grow up or grow old with their spouse or get married for that matter. It is a day to tell the people they left behind that we still remember and we still are grateful for what they have done for us. And that their pain, their grief, and their loss is not just another excuse to indulge our selfishness with another day of vacation. I've been proud of the members of this church because over the last 9 years, rain or shine, you've been standing out there and coming to the ceremonies, and the pastor every year delivers an invocation or a message. But I'm saddened by how little regard is given to this day. I'm saddened because we can find an excuse, any excuse, to do something that we really don't want to do. Yeah, the lawn needs to get mowed or it's going to turn into a hayfield. But I wonder how many of those people would give up mowing that grass once to have their son or daughter back. Paul says in Philippians, do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit, but in humility consider others better than yourself. Each of you should look not only to your own interests, but also to the interests of others. That was the verse leading into what the pastor talked about today. And it's highlighted in my Bible. I think that's a principle that everybody could live by. I bet you that's a principle that would bridge a lot of huge gaps that are forming in this country now. And the question I want to ask you, and you folks at home, is a couple hours standing in solidarity with the survivors, honoring our dead, really too much of a sacrifice for us to make? Thank you.
Ron, thank you. There's nothing that I can say to follow that or add to that. It was the living heart of what tomorrow represents. We're going to pray. You folks don't have to take off right away. There's coffee and snacks prepared downstairs. This is our first coffee hour in forever. So I hope you stick around, shake hands, drink coffee, linger as long as you possibly desire. Tomorrow morning, Southbury begins at 9 a.m. Is that correct, Mr. Bentley? Down here we'll assemble, 9 o'clock? 9 o'clock sharp, we're going to assemble down here, and then uptown at noontime on the dot. So we'd love to see you then. Again, please do stick around though. And Ron, thank you. Father, we come before you once again recognizing our need for these principles of humility and selflessness and sacrifice. And God, I love that you laid Philippians 2 in the opening verses on Ron's heart, in this whole sermon dealt with verses 5 through 11 with no coordination. You're trying to say something to us individually and as a body. As we go our separate ways, Lord, or as we stick around and just spend some time with one another, for the first time freely and sometime, I pray you continue to add your favor and your blessing, helping us to live hard after you in the beautiful example that you have set forth. Bless us as we go our separate ways. In the name of Jesus Christ, everyone, Lord willing, says amen.